She had always loved music. From the earliest memory she could recall, the sound of piano keys under her fingers felt like magic. The way a simple press of a key could create something so alive and full of emotion was a feeling she could never explain in words. She spent hours every day practicing in her small room, the piano sitting in the corner as if waiting for her to pour her heart into it. Her parents noticed her love for music, but they were practical people. They reminded her often that talent alone would not pay the bills, but she never let their words dim her passion. Music was her refuge, her joy, and her identity. At school, she was shy. She often kept to herself, preferring her piano and the notes she could control over the unpredictable world around her. She had a few friends who understood her love for music, but most of her classmates were indifferent. Some even laughed at her when she spoke about piano competitions or recitals she had attended. It was not cruel teasing, just casual dismissal, but it stung nonetheless. She learned to laugh along, to brush off their comments, and to focus on the one thing that mattered to her, her piano one day. She heard about a local talent show that was going to be held in the town hall. It was open to anyone, and the prize was not only a small amount of money, but also recognition in the local newspaper. At first, she hesitated. Public performances were not her favorite. She had always preferred the quiet of her home where she could make mistakes and correct them without anyone watching. But something inside her nudged her to try. Maybe this time, she could show people what she was capable of. As she signed up, she felt a mix of excitement and fear. She imagined walking onto the stage, the bright lights shining down on her, and a crowd of strangers watching every move. Her stomach tightened, and her hands shook slightly just thinking about it. But she also imagined the sound of the piano filling the hall, the music echoing through the space, and for a brief moment, all fear disappeared. She reminded herself that she had worked hard, practiced tirelessly, and knew her music better than anyone else. Maybe, just maybe, this was her chance. The day of the talent show arrived faster than she expected. She walked into the hall, the smell of polished wood and fresh paint filling her senses. She could hear people chatting, laughing, and getting settled into their seats. The energy was alive, a mix of nervousness and anticipation. She made her way to the stage, her heart pounding, and set her music sheet on the piano stand. As she adjusted the bench, she noticed a few people from her school sitting in the audience. Some of them smiled politely, but a couple of them exchanged looks and whispered among themselves. She felt a familiar knot of unease in her stomach. She knew they did not believe she was capable of impressing anyone. The host called her name. She took a deep breath, walking onto the stage. The lights were brighter than she imagined, and for a moment, she froze. She looked out into the audience, seeing the faces of strangers, friends, and those who had doubted her. She tried to calm herself, reminding herself that this was just another practice in a different setting. Her fingers hovered over the keys, and she began to play. At first, the music was soft and tentative. She could hear a few whispers from the audience, some of them questioning whether she could carry the performance. She felt the weight of their doubt pressing down on her, threatening to shake her confidence. But then, something shifted. She let the music guide her, her fingers moving more confidently, each note resonating with emotion she had practiced for years. The whispers faded into silence, replaced by the soft, beautiful sound of her piano. She could see a few people leaning forward in their seats, listening more intently. She felt a spark of hope. Maybe they were beginning to hear what she had known all along. She closed her eyes, letting the music flow through her, telling a story that words could not. Every note carried a piece of her heart, every chord a reflection of her dedication and love for music. In that moment, she forgot about the fear, the doubts, and the whispers. It was just her and the piano, creating something pure and beautiful. As she reached the final piece, the most challenging part of her performance, she felt a surge of determination. She would not let anyone's judgment overshadow her passion. She played with precision, emotion, and grace, each note ringing clearly and powerfully. The audience was captivated, some sitting in stunned silence, unable to look away from the display of talent. The people who had doubted her earlier were shifting uncomfortably in their seats, their expressions slowly changing from skepticism to amazement. When she finally played the last note, she held it, letting it linger in the air. Then, slowly, she opened her eyes and looked at the audience. There was a moment of silence, a pause, as if everyone was trying to process what they had just heard. And then the applause began. At first, it was soft, hesitant, but it quickly grew louder, filling the hall with claps, cheers, and whistles. She felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of relief, pride, and pure joy. She had done it. She had faced the doubt, the whispers, and the fear. And she had emerged victorious. As she left the stage, her hands still trembling slightly, she noticed a few familiar faces approaching. Some of her classmates, the ones who had laughed at her before, were now smiling genuinely, offering congratulations and praise. It was strange to see their expressions, a mix of surprise and admiration. She accepted their words graciously, not letting the past insults linger in her mind. This was her moment, her triumph, and she deserved to feel the joy of it fully. That night, as she sat at home, she reflected on the experience. She realized that the insults and doubts had only made her stronger. They had pushed her to practice harder, to focus more, and to truly believe in herself. She understood that talent alone was not enough. Courage, perseverance, and self-belief were just as important. The piano had always been her friend, her confidant. And now it had also been her victory. She knew this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges, more skeptics, and more moments of doubt. But she also knew that she had the strength to face them. The applause, the recognition, and the sense of accomplishment were not just about proving others wrong, they were about proving to herself that she was capable, talented, and resilient. Music had given her a voice when words failed, and she would continue to let it speak for her, louder and stronger than ever, as she prepared for the next day, the next performance, or the next challenge. She carried with her the memory of that moment on stage. She had faced the doubt, played through the fear, and let her talent shine. And in doing so, she had discovered something even more important: the power of believing in oneself, no matter what anyone else thought. The piano was not just an instrument. It was a part of her, and she knew that as long as she kept playing, she could overcome anything. After the talent show, she felt a mixture of relief and excitement. The performance had gone better than she had imagined, but she knew that it was only the first step. Her confidence was higher, but she also knew she could not stop here. There were pieces she wanted to master, techniques she wanted to refine, and emotions she wanted to express even more powerfully. She decided that her next goal would be to take her piano skills to a level where no one could doubt her talent ever again. She started waking up earlier, each day to practice before school. Mornings were quiet, with the sun just beginning to light her room and the world still asleep. She loved these moments when she could play freely, without distractions. Every note, every chord, every passage she learned became a small victory. Some days she struggled with a piece for hours, trying to perfect it, but she did not give up. She reminded herself that every challenge she overcame made her a better musician. Her family noticed the change in her. She was more focused, more determined, and her love for the piano seemed deeper than ever. Her parents, though still practical about the future, supported her. They adjusted their schedules so she could have uninterrupted practice time. Her younger sibling, who had once been indifferent to her piano playing, began to watch her in awe, asking questions about the music she played, and cheering her on when she finally mastered a difficult section. It felt good to have their support, and it motivated her to push herself even further. One afternoon, she decided to revisit the music she had played at the talent show. Listening to her own recording, she noticed little mistakes she had not realized during the live performance. There were moments where the tempo faltered, chords that were not as clean as she wanted, and dynamics that could have been stronger. Instead of feeling discouraged, she felt inspired. She knew that by working on these details, she could transform her music from good to extraordinary. She began to explore more complex compositions, some that she had always admired but never dared to play. They were challenging, filled with difficult passages and intricate rhythms, but she welcomed the difficulty. Each new piece was like a mountain to climb. There were days when frustration threatened to take over. but she reminded herself that every great musician had faced struggles and setbacks. She would not allow temporary frustration to stop her from reaching her goal. Her practice sessions became longer and more structured. She broke pieces into smaller sections, focusing on one part at a time. She experimented with tempo, dynamics, and expression. She recorded herself, listened critically, and adjusted her playing. Every day she pushed herself a little further, building both skill and confidence. Sometimes she would play the same passage over and over until it was perfect. At times she felt exhausted, but the joy she felt when a section finally came together made the effort worthwhile. Outside of practice, she sought inspiration wherever she could find it. She attended local concerts, listened to recordings of famous pianists, and read about their lives. She wanted to understand not just how they played, but why. What emotions were they trying to convey? How did they connect with the audience? She realized that technical skill was only part of being a musician. The ability to communicate and touch hearts was equally important. During one of her visits to a music shop, she met an older pianist who had been performing for decades. He listened to her play a short piece and offered gentle guidance. He taught her small techniques to improve her fingering and posture, shared stories of his own struggles, and encouraged her to keep believing in herself. His words stayed with her, reminding her that dedication and passion could carry her far. She practiced with renewed energy, feeling as if she had a mentor cheering her on. School life continued alongside her practice. Some classmates still teased her about spending so much time on the piano. They called it a waste of time, or said she would never achieve anything serious. It hurt at first, but she had learned to let it slide. The experience at the talent show had taught her that proof came through action, not words. She decided to focus on her music and let her performances speak for themselves. One evening, she faced a particularly difficult piece that she had attempted for weeks without success. The notes seemed impossible, the rhythms confusing, and every attempt ended in frustration. She felt tears prick her eyes, a mixture of disappointment and self-doubt. But then she took a deep breath and reminded herself why she loved the piano in the first place. It was not just about impressing others. It was about expressing herself, exploring emotions, and growing through the music. She started again, slowly, carefully, focusing on one note at a time. Hours passed, but eventually the piece began to make sense. When she finally played it through without a mistake, a wave of satisfaction and pride washed over her. She realized that perseverance was more rewarding than immediate success. She also began to experiment with composing her own music. At first, it was simple melodies, but over time her compositions became more complex and expressive. Each original piece felt like a part of her soul captured in sound. Sharing these small compositions with her family and friends brought her joy, and their encouragement motivated her to continue creating. She began to understand that music was not just about technical skill. It was about communicating feelings and connecting with others. In the following months, she prepared for another performance, this time at a small community recital. She wanted to test herself in front of an audience again, but this time she felt more prepared. She chose a piece that was technically demanding and emotionally expressive. Her practice was meticulous, leaving no section unfinished or unpolished. She imagined the audience, their reactions, and how she wanted them to feel. Each day, her confidence grew alongside her skill. Finally, the day of the recital arrived. She arrived at the venue early, setting up her music and adjusting the piano. The room was filled with people, some familiar, some strangers, and a few critics who had once doubted her. Her stomach tightened, but she focused on her preparation and the months of practice that had led to this moment. She remembered the older pianist's advice: play not just with your hands, but with your heart. As she began to play, the music flowed naturally. Every note felt alive, every phrase carried emotion, and every chord resonated with clarity. The audience listened intently, some leaning forward, others closing their eyes to absorb the sound. She felt the energy of the room, the connection between herself and the listeners, and it filled her with exhilaration. Her doubts melted away, replaced by the pure joy of creating music. After the performance, people came up to her, praising her skill and the emotion she had conveyed. Some admitted they had doubted her before, but now they could see her talent clearly. The experience reinforced what she had already learned. Hard work, perseverance, and belief in oneself could overcome even the strongest skepticism. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had earned respect through her dedication and passion. That night, as she returned home, she reflected on the journey so far. Each practice session, each moment of frustration, and each small victory had brought her closer to her true potential. She realized that preparation was more than just learning notes. It was about cultivating resilience, focus, and self-confidence. She understood that music was not only about impressing others, but about expressing her innermost feelings and sharing them with the world. She sat at her piano in her quiet room, her fingers brushing lightly over the keys. She smiled, remembering the path she had taken. From those early days of quiet practice to the first performance where she had proven herself, to the long hours of preparation that had followed. The journey was not over, but she felt ready for whatever came next. She knew that her passion, dedication, and love for music would guide her, and that every challenge she faced was an opportunity to grow. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a companion, a teacher, and a source of endless inspiration. She was ready to continue her journey, confident that her talent and determination would shine even brighter in the days to come. The excitement and pride she felt from her last performance gave her a sense of accomplishment, but deep down, she knew there was more to achieve. She wanted to test her skills in a setting where she could face real scrutiny, not just supportive audiences. She wanted to see if she could maintain composure and brilliance in front of people who might doubt her, people who might not expect her to succeed. This thought both frightened and motivated her. A week later, she heard about a larger event happening in the city. It was a public recital held in a hall known for hosting professional musicians. The audience would be bigger, more discerning, and some of the people who had once criticized her might be there. She felt a rush of adrenaline mixed with apprehension. This was not just another chance to play. It was an opportunity to prove, without a shadow of doubt, that her talent was real and worthy. She spent the next days preparing with more intensity than ever. Her routine became disciplined and rigorous. She divided her practice into focus sessions, scales to maintain agility, intricate passages to improve speed, and long musical phrases to perfect expression. Every day, she set new goals for herself, small challenges that built toward mastering the full pieces she intended to perform. She made sure that each note, each dynamic, and each emotional nuance was exactly as she wanted it. Her family continued to support her, understanding that this event was more than a performance, it was a test of her growth. They adjusted their schedules to allow her uninterrupted time with the piano. Even her younger siblings started watching more closely, often leaving the room only to peek back in and give encouraging smiles. These small gestures of support became anchors, reminding her that she was not alone in her journey. During her practice sessions, she occasionally faced moments of self-doubt. The pieces she chose were difficult, more challenging than anything she had attempted before. Some sections seemed impossible, with intricate fingerwork and subtle phrasing that required extreme control. She would make mistakes repeatedly, each one testing her patience. But she reminded herself that this struggle was necessary. Every musician faced these hurdles, and overcoming them was what separated passion from mastery. To help herself focus, she recorded her sessions. Listening to playback, she could hear the areas needing improvement. Subtle mistakes in rhythm or expression that were invisible in the moment of playing. She made meticulous notes, adjusted her technique, and replayed the pieces again and again. Slowly but surely, the pieces began to take shape. Each practice session refining her skills, shaping her performance into something powerful and precise. In addition to technique, she focused on emotional delivery. She wanted her music to tell a story, to touch the audience's hearts. She imagined different scenarios for each piece, moments of joy, sorrow, excitement, and reflection, and tried to channel those feelings through her playing. Each time she performed, she aimed not just to play notes, but to convey meaning. to make the audience feel something deep and genuine. As the day of the recital approached, her nervousness grew. She worried about her hands trembling under pressure, about making mistakes in front of experienced musicians, and about people who had once doubted her. But she reminded herself of how far she had come. She had faced ridicule before, performed under pressure, and survived every challenge with determination. This recital was just another step, and she was ready. On the day of the performance, she arrived early at the city hall. The building was grander than any place she had performed before. The stage was large, the piano polished and gleaming under the bright lights, and the audience seats stretched far back into the hall. She felt the weight of the environment pressing down on her, a mix of awe and anxiety. But she took a deep breath and focused on the preparation she had done over the weeks before going on stage. She watched other performers. Some were older, some younger, all talented in their own way. A few performers received polite applause, while others got more enthusiastic responses. She observed quietly, learning from their presence, noticing how they carried themselves, and imagining how she could make her own performance unique. It was inspiring, but also intimidating. She reminded herself that this was her moment to shine. Finally, her name was called. She walked onto the stage, feeling the bright lights warm her skin and the audience's eyes on her. She sat at the piano, arranged her music sheets, and positioned her hands. The hall was silent, except for a few coughs and the distant shuffling of feet. She took a deep breath, letting the calm settle over her. This was the moment she had prepared for. She started her performance with a simple introduction, allowing her fingers to reconnect with the keys. The sound filled the hall, pure and clear. She could feel the audience leaning forward, listening intently. Her nerves began to settle as she focused entirely on the music. Slowly, she moved into more complex sections, her fingers dancing over the keys with precision and confidence. Each note was intentional, each phrase full of emotion, carrying the story she wanted to tell. As she progressed, the music grew more intricate. She played rapid sequences and delicate melodies, switching effortlessly between dynamic contrasts. Her training and practice allowed her to navigate even the most difficult passages with grace. The audience was captivated, some leaning in with anticipation, others closing their eyes to fully absorb the music. Even the experienced musicians in the audience seemed impressed by her technical skill and expressive delivery. Midway through the performance, she encountered a particularly challenging passage. The notes required speed, accuracy, and perfect timing. For a brief moment, she hesitated, her fingers almost slipping. But then she remembered all the hours she had spent practicing, countless repetitions, the corrections, and the determination that had carried her this far. She took a deep breath, let her mind focus, and continued. The passage came through perfectly, and a wave of relief and pride washed over her. By the final piece, she was completely immersed in the music. The notes were no longer just sounds. They were extensions of her emotions, her hard work, and her perseverance. She played with intensity, precision, and heart, feeling the connection with the audience grow stronger with every measure. Some listeners were moved visibly, their eyes glistening with emotion, while others sat in stunned silence, clearly impressed by her talent. When she reached the last chord, she let it ring, holding it for a moment to let the sound fill the hall. Then she lifted her hands, taking a deep breath and opening her eyes. The silence that followed was immediate, almost as if everyone was trying to process what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly applause began, soft at first, then growing louder, more enthusiastic, and more heartfelt. People were on their feet, clapping, cheering, and whistling. Acknowledging her incredible performance, she felt a mixture of exhilaration, pride, and gratitude. The effort, discipline, and dedication she had poured into her music had paid off. She had faced the fear of performing in a new, larger, and more critical environment and had succeeded. Even those who had doubted her before, sitting in the audience, had to acknowledge her skill and artistry. It was a moment of validation, not just for her talent, but for her perseverance and courage. After leaving the stage, several people came up to her, including musicians, audience members, and even critics who had previously underestimated her. They praised her technical ability, the emotion in her playing, and her stage presence. She listened politely, accepting compliments with grace, but also felt a quiet satisfaction within herself. This acknowledgement was not only about being recognized, it was about proving to herself that she could rise to any challenge. That evening, as she returned home, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the early days of private practice to the small talent show, the months of preparation, and now this significant recital, each step had built her skill, confidence, and resilience. She understood that success was not instantaneous. It required patience, hard work, and a willingness to face obstacles. The piano had been her teacher, guiding her through every challenge, teaching her the value of perseverance and self-belief. She sat at her piano later that night, fingers gently resting on the keys. She smiled, remembering the moment she had conquered the challenging passages, felt the audience's admiration, and realized her growth. Each note she played was a reminder of how far she had come and how much further she could go. She knew this was not the end of her journey, but a milestone that marked the transformation. From a passionate student to a confident musician ready to face the world and her future performances, with courage and heart. The days after her city recital were filled with a new sense of confidence. She knew she had performed well, but she also realized that to truly shine, she needed to challenge herself even more. She wanted to reach a level where every note she played would leave an impression, where every audience member, no matter who they were, would be touched by her music. The thought excited her, but it also carried pressure. She had to improve constantly, and the next goal had to be even higher. She decided to select pieces that were known for their difficulty, compositions that even skilled pianists approached cautiously. These pieces required control, emotion, and technical mastery. She spent hours breaking down every segment, identifying the parts that needed focus, and practicing them slowly, gradually building speed and accuracy. She discovered that perseverance was becoming a habit, not a chore, and the more she worked, the more confident she felt. Her family continued to support her journey. They adjusted their routines so she could dedicate uninterrupted time to practice. Her parents often observed her playing, impressed by her dedication and progress. Her younger sibling had become a constant companion during practice, sometimes watching quietly, sometimes offering encouragement, and often clapping when she finally perfected a challenging section. These small moments reminded her that, while music was personal, sharing it with others created joy and connection. She also sought guidance from experienced musicians whenever possible. A mentor she had met at a previous recital offered advice on finger positioning, phrasing, and expression. They suggested exercises to strengthen her technique and shared stories of their own struggles with difficult pieces. These lessons were invaluable, giving her insight beyond what self-practice could provide. She applied the advice diligently, integrating small changes that gradually enhanced her performance. Despite the progress, she still faced moments of doubt. Some passages seemed insurmountable, rhythms too complicated, chords too fast. There were days when she would play a section repeatedly and still make mistakes. At times, she felt frustration bubbling up, threatening to overshadow her love for music. But she reminded herself of her accomplishments, the growth she had already achieved, and the joy music brought her. She learned to pause, take a deep breath, and approach the challenge with patience rather than frustration. As the next major recital approached, she began imagining the audience. She thought about their reactions, the way they would sit, listen, and respond. Unlike before, she no longer worried about skeptics or critics. Her preparation had built a strong foundation, and she knew that her performance would speak for itself. She focused on conveying emotion, telling a story through her music, and connecting with the listeners on a deeper level. The day of the recital arrived, and she entered the hall early to familiarize herself with the piano and the stage. The venue was elegant and large, filled with chairs and a stage that gleamed under the lights. She adjusted the bench, checked her sheet music, and practiced a few notes to warm up. Her fingers felt agile and ready. The audience began filling the seats, a mix of familiar faces, other musicians, and people who were curious about the event. Some of the individuals who had doubted her skill were present, and a small part of her felt a flutter of nerves. But she pushed it aside, reminding herself of all the preparation that had brought her here. When it was her turn, she walked confidently onto the stage. She felt the bright lights on her face and the eyes of the audience on her. Taking a deep breath, she positioned her hands and began. The first notes were deliberate, precise, and full of emotion. The audience listened intently, their attention drawn into the music. She moved seamlessly into the more complex sections, her fingers executing rapid sequences with accuracy and grace. The music flowed from her heart, each chord and note conveying the dedication and passion she had poured into her practice. Halfway through her performance, she reached the most challenging section of the piece. Her fingers needed to move swiftly across the keys, maintaining clarity and strength while expressing subtle dynamics. For a moment, her mind raced, worried about a mistake, but she remembered her months of preparation. She had rehearsed this passage countless times, and now it was time to trust herself. She focused, letting muscle memory and concentration take over. The passage came alive, precise and powerful, and she felt a surge of triumph. The audience responded subtly at first, leaning in to follow her performance. Gradually, the room became more engaged. Faces that had been skeptical now reflected surprise and admiration. Her playing conveyed emotion that transcended technical skill. The audience could feel the story she was telling through the music. She noticed a few people closing their eyes, swaying gently to the rhythm, completely absorbed. It was a moment where she realized the true power of music to communicate and move people beyond words. As she progressed to the final segment, the intensity of the music increased. She played with a combination of technical precision and emotional depth, building tension and resolution within the piece. Every phrase was intentional, each note crafted with care. The energy in the hall grew, a subtle anticipation that the performance was reaching its peak. She felt connected to the audience in a way she had never experienced before, as if her music was speaking directly to each listener. Finally, she reached the last chord. She held it, letting the sound resonate and fill the hall. Then, she released her hands from the keys and paused, taking in the silence. The audience sat in awe for a brief moment, processing what they had just heard. Then, applause erupted, growing louder and louder, filling the space with appreciation and admiration. People stood, cheering, clapping, and some even whistled, unable to contain their excitement. She felt a wave of joy, relief, and pride wash over her. The months of preparation, the hours of practice, the challenges she had overcome, all had culminated in this moment. After the performance, people approached her to offer praise and congratulations. Even those who had doubted her previously expressed astonishment at her skill and emotional delivery. She listened politely, feeling gratitude and satisfaction. This recognition was not about proving others wrong. It was about acknowledging the journey she had taken, the dedication she had invested, and the growth she had achieved. It was a testament to her perseverance and love for music. Later that evening, she sat alone at her piano, reflecting on the experience. She realized that the performance had taught her more than just technique. It had reinforced the importance of preparation, resilience, and self-belief. Every challenge she had faced, every mistake she had corrected, every hour of practice had strengthened not only her skills, but also her character. Music had become more than a passion. It was a source of personal growth and fulfillment. She began to plan for future performances, considering new pieces that would challenge her further. She knew that her journey was ongoing and that there would always be more to learn, more to express, and more opportunities to inspire others through her music. The recital had been a turning point, a moment where her dedication and talent converged, proving to herself that she could rise to any challenge. Sitting at the piano, her fingers resting gently on the keys, she smiled. The music had taken her to new heights, shown her the power of perseverance, and revealed the depth of her own potential. She felt ready for whatever came next, confident that her talent, passion, and determination would continue to guide her. The journey was far from over, but she now knew that she had the strength and skill to face any obstacle. play with heart, and move anyone who listened to her music. The day of the final recital arrived, and she felt a mix of excitement, nerves, and determination. This performance would be the most important one yet, a moment where she could truly show not just her skill, but her heart and soul through music. She had prepared for weeks, refining every note, every phrase, and every emotional nuance. This was her chance to fully prove to herself and to anyone who doubted her that she was a pianist of extraordinary ability. She arrived at the concert hall early too, familiarize herself with the stage and the grand piano waiting for her. The room was magnificent, with rows of seats stretching far back and chandeliers casting a soft glow over the polished wooden floor. She set up her music sheets and adjusted the piano bench carefully, making sure everything felt right. Her hands hovered over the keys, and she took a few moments to breathe. Feeling the energy of the hall settle around her, the audience began to fill the room. Some were familiar faces, friends and family who had supported her journey, and some were strangers, people drawn by curiosity or love for music. She noticed a few skeptics, people who had once dismissed her abilities, sitting quietly in the back. A small part of her felt nervous about their judgment, but she quickly pushed the thought aside. She had prepared, and she trusted herself. The music would speak louder than words. When her name was announced, she walked confidently onto the stage. She felt the warmth of the lights, the soft rustle of the audience, and the anticipation building around her. Sitting at the piano, she positioned her hands, closed her eyes for a brief moment, and let her fingers find their place on the keys. The first notes were soft, delicate, and precise, immediately capturing the audience's attention. She began her performance with a piece that gradually built in complexity and emotion, guiding the listeners into the story she wanted to tell as she progressed. Her fingers danced across the keys with a combination of speed, grace, and power. Every note, every chord was delivered with purpose, reflecting the countless hours of practice and dedication she had poured into her craft. The audience was captivated. Some leaned forward in their seats, others closed their eyes to fully immerse themselves in the music. The skeptics she had noticed earlier shifted in their seats, their expressions betraying surprise and growing admiration. She played with emotion, letting her heart guide her hands. There were moments of intense passion, moments of gentle reflection, and moments of joy and exuberance. Each phrase told a story, each note conveyed a feeling that went beyond words. She felt the connection with the audience, a silent communication that passed between her and every listener. The music was alive, vibrant, and undeniably powerful. Midway through the performance, she reached a section that was notoriously difficult, with rapid passages and intricate hand movements. For a moment, she felt a flicker of doubt, her fingers tempted to hesitate. But she remembered all the challenges she had overcome, all the hours of practice and the belief that had carried her this far. She took a deep breath and let her training take over. Her fingers moved with precision, agility, and confidence, executing the passage flawlessly. A wave of relief and pride washed over her as she continued into the next section. The audience responded with quiet awe, their focus unwavering. She could feel their attention, their emotions, and their admiration growing with each measure. She moved seamlessly from technical brilliance to expressive storytelling, her music touching every corner of the hall. The energy in the room was palpable, and she felt empowered, as if the piano had become an extension of herself. Speaking her truth with every note as she approached the final piece, the intensity and emotional depth increased. She played with a balance of technical mastery and heartfelt expression, building anticipation and excitement. The audience was spellbound, many sitting in stunned silence, others visibly moved by the beauty of her performance. She had become completely absorbed in the music, forgetting everything else, feeling only the connection between herself, the piano, and the listeners. The climax of the recital arrived. She played with intensity, precision, and emotion, each note resonating with power and beauty. Her hands flew over the keys effortlessly, conveying not just skill, but the depth of her dedication, passion, and love for music. She felt a surge of exhilaration and fulfillment, knowing that this was the culmination of years of effort and perseverance. Every challenge she had faced, every doubt she had overcome, led to this moment. Finally, she reached the last chord. She let it ring, holding the sound, allowing it to fill the hall completely. Then she lifted her hands and paused, letting the silence linger just long enough for the audience to fully absorb what they had heard. The applause began softly, then swelled into a thunderous ovation. People stood, clapping, cheering, and whistling, expressing their amazement and admiration. She felt an overwhelming sense of joy, pride, and relief. She had done it. She had proven to herself and to anyone who had doubted her that her talent was real, was powerful and moving. After the performance, people approached her to congratulate her. Some had been critics, some had doubted her skills, but all now acknowledged her extraordinary ability. She accepted their praise with grace, feeling a quiet satisfaction within herself. This recognition was not about revenge or proving others wrong. It was about celebrating her growth, dedication, and the journey she had undertaken. The applause, the admiration, and the acknowledgement of her skill were testaments to her perseverance and unwavering passion. Later that evening, as she sat alone at her piano, she reflected on her journey. From the early days of private practice to the talent show, the city recital, and now this grand performance, every step had shaped her, tested her, and strengthened her. She realized that her music had become more than just a hobby or skill. It was a reflection of her heart, a means of expressing herself, and a source of personal growth. The challenges she had faced, the moments of doubt, and the countless hours of practice had all contributed to the musician she had become. She began to consider the future, imagining new pieces, more challenging performances, and opportunities to share her music with a wider audience. She knew there would always be more to learn, more ways to grow, and more stages to conquer. But she also knew that she had built a foundation of skill, resilience, and confidence that would carry her forward. Her talent was no longer a secret, and her journey had given her the courage to face whatever came next. Sitting at the piano, her fingers resting lightly on the keys, she smiled. The music had carried her to new heights, shown her the power of perseverance, and revealed the depth of her potential. She felt a quiet sense of accomplishment and an unshakable belief in herself. The journey had been long and challenging, but it had also been rewarding and transformative. She was ready for the next chapter, confident that her passion, dedication, and talent would continue to guide her, inspire others, and bring her music to life in ways she had never imagined. The piano had become a part of her, a voice through which she could express herself fully. And she knew that as long as she continued to play with heart and soul, she could face any challenge, overcome any doubt, and touch the hearts of all who listened.